Welcome to Strength Chat Podcast, presented by Kabuki Strength. Introducing your hosts, Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength, Rudy Kadlub, mature athlete and coach, and the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen.
Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, the mad scientist of strength, myself, Chris Duffin. To my right, we have Dr. Rudolph, our master, coach, and athlete. And to my left, I don't introduce him anymore. I'm not happy with him anymore.
The man who is closer to doing the splits than Duffin.
You are not. You are not closer to doing the splits. I need proof.
Is that because you have such skinny calves or what?
Oh, no.
Oh, you saw my picture yesterday. I am so far ahead of you. So, Brandon and I have a little bit of a challenge going for no useful purpose whatsoever, and I'm not sure exactly how it got started. But
I've actually wanted to be able to do this for a long time.
The split off, is that it?
Oh yeah, we got a month. We got a month to see if us two fat powerlifters can do the splits. I'm pretty close. I'll show you my picture, Rudy. I'm 4 days in.
Where did you start? Where did you start though? Like, how far off were you before this whole thing got going?
Neither of us are that far off. I think to begin with, both of us have
6
pretty
inches
good.
or so.
Okay.
Yeah, both of us have pretty good hip mobility, which is
Okay.
surprising. You don't expect 260, 270, 100-pound powerlifters to have a lot of mobility, but
Whoa, easy, bud. I'm not 270.
You. I was referring to myself.
Okay.
I know that's lean body mass. You're like around 100.
Lean body mass, at least 230.
155?
About 230, that's it.
155. All right. So today, we're really happy to have Brandon McDaniel on. He's the head strength and conditioning coach for the LA Dodgers. And, so really great to have you on today with us. And
Yeah, really appreciate being on.
yeah. And actually, we're going to be working together next week. Both Dr. Rudolph and myself will be heading down to spring training and spending some time with you. So we're excited about that. But,
As we are too.
Yeah. So, we've got a lot of our listeners that are, heading down the strength and conditioning path. And, I think it would be...
As a career.
As a career, yeah. And I think it would be good to just start off with, a discussion of, how'd you get to where you are today? What was the path that you took? What got you, even inspired or heading that direction to begin with? So,
Yeah, no, there's a lot obviously that goes into that. The biggest thing where I'm at now is because of baseball. High school baseball player, played since I was 4 years old. College baseball player, and had some ups and downs with that as things were going on. But at the same time, was a competitive power lifter in high school. Was a football player. Graduated high school at 270 pounds.
Ooh.
So, as we're joking
That's
around,
a big
that's
boy.
a big high schooler.
He's a big boy.
it was a big boy for 6'2". That wasn't,
Yeah.
that wasn't an ordinary thing. I went to college to play baseball then, and I would say that about halfway through my freshman year, I realized that things weren't going to work out. They were going to work out the way my body was. And I was very strong. I was, pretty decent competitive power lifter at the time and got away from that for a while and lost 70 pounds in almost 6 months and did it completely wrong. Starved myself, ran in a trash bag, ate carrots and celery every night and, basically cried myself to sleep just to fit into a uniform different.
Yeah, you probably burn a fair bit of muscle doing that then too.
Yeah, I would say probably more muscle than fat by the way I did it. And so I'm a business major at the time in college, University of South Dakota. I'm from Council Bluffs, Iowa, right next to Omaha, Nebraska. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I can't even hit the ball out of the infield anymore. And so that kind of opened up my passion for strength and conditioning, and changed my major to exercise science, and at one point wanted to be a PE teacher, and really got into this whole fitness thing. Like, had the weightlifting background already, was already in love with that, but started to figure out what movement patterns were and what mobility was and what stability was and how you could be strong, but that maybe didn't translate, and really started diving into that. And went to college at USD for 2 years. They cut our baseball program. I transferred to Wayne State, Nebraska, a little D2 school that we used to beat up on a lot of baseball teams, but they had an awesome exercise science program. And, at this point I'm 21, 22, like there's no way I'm going to play professional baseball. It's every kid's dream. That's, or every kid has a dream. I guess
Right.
that was mine. And I said, you know what, like I'm going to find a way to stay in the game, and started applying for every single internship that was out there. And I was very fortunate. A guy by the name of Chris Duffin was a minor league coordinator for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he took my resume on and went on as an unpaid intern to get college credit, and was held. They kept me on staff after my internship was over, for the pure fact that I could catch bullpens and throw batting practice. And I knew
had nothing to do with your strength and conditioning knowledge.
No, none whatsoever. I was able to stay on and learn a ton about strength and conditioning at that time. And so that part was huge. The fact that I had that background in baseball, I never would have learned anything about strength and conditioning at that point. So then I was able to move on and work with them for a few years, and then decided at that point, like, you know what, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I don't really know anything about strength and conditioning. I know a ton about baseball. I know a ton about the way guys move on the field, and the basic baseball lift, the 2 sets of 10, a back squat, double leg RDL, dumbbell bench press, lat pull down. And I got guys coming in that are working at EXOS, and they're working with Cressy, and they're working with Bomberitos and IMG, and they know all these things that are going on in the world, and I'm sitting there stuck. And so I kind of took my talents at that point, south to ATSU, online program for human movement, and got my master's in human movement, and was then felt pretty equipped, I guess, as a strength coach, as a fitness professional. Got a job at EXOS, and worked in the military for them for almost 2 years in Maryland, and really started, like, working in the military is a crash course in strength and conditioning, in my opinion, because you learn all walks of life. You learn all movement patterns, bad backs, bad shoulders, bad hips, bad knees.
They're all
I
hurt.
was gonna say you probably see a lot of that there too. So.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible. So it was almost like a 2-year, don't want to call it a doctorate,
mm-hmm.
but like really got to dive into a lot of different things, and still inside of me, there's this 21-year-old kid saying, like, I want to be in baseball, and worked really hard to get back into the game. It's really it's harder to get back in than it is to get in the first place, because people are always like, hey, why are you,
right?
Why'd you leave in the first place?
Yep.
And EXOS at the time worked out a deal with the Dodgers, where they were going to supply strength coaches and some of their tactics, some of their methods to the Dodgers to see if that worked out. And I raised my hand right away when that opportunity came up. Came over with Sue Falsoni when she came from EXOS to be the head trainer for the Dodgers in 2012. Spent a year in AAA with them, and then at the end of the 2012 season, I was promoted to LA, and I've been here ever since. In the game, like where I'm at now to where I was 11 years ago when I got in, I've personally grown a ton, but the game has grown a ton. We talk more about high performance now, and strength and conditioning being a component of that, a huge component in my opinion, and as opposed to just 11 years ago, it was the weight room was this little separate entity off to the side, and a bunch of old school baseball guys didn't want you around, and a bunch of new school guys were skeptical.
Yeah, we've had that conversation before
with a few different people in baseball still, that they're still encountering that, and it's some of them. It's interesting. Some teams have definitely seemed to progress, yet others are still have some of that old school mentality.
You have coaches and managers that are not 27 or 31; they're 61 or so, and they still hold on to that. Weightlifting is going to tighten you up, and it'll cramp your swing or mess up your shoulder or whatever. So, do you counter that still with some of the coaches? And let's don't talk names here, but are there other strength and conditioning coaches in baseball that still have a hard time getting across the more updated, modern techniques in strength and conditioning?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we switched coaching staffs 2 years ago, and my previous Don Mattingly was a manager, Tim Wallach was a bench coach, Rick Honeycutt was a pitching coach, and still is the pitching coach now. But we switched staffs, and just that era of guys that played, in the 80s and 90s, they didn't have anything against the weight room. It wasn't like they were trying to kick guys out of it, but they didn't have it when they played. And now you look at our staff now, we have a bunch of younger guys that actually had strength and conditioning as a component somewhat when they played the game. And so conversations are evolving every year because I think that's happening everywhere. 2007, my first year in the game, there was, 30% of the coaches were full-time in the minor leagues. And now you're looking at like 90 or 92% of them. So obviously the organizations have kind of taken that on. But we're able to have those transition conversations now of like, okay, this is how this translates. This is a transitional movement to how to throw harder, how to hit farther, how to rotate better, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a continuum. Like there shouldn't be a break between, the sport coaching to strength coaching to here's my, rehab clinical. Like everybody needs to be involved in the process and know what everybody else is doing and kind of have a common theme of methodology or approach, right? I mean,
right.
That's to excel. That's what a program really needs to strive for.
Yeah, and at bare minimum, like, let's just look at volume considerations and workload considerations. If we're not on the same page, or we're crushing a guy in the weight room, or vice versa, they're crushing him on, an infield guy's going out and taking 100 extra ground balls because the skill coach is trying to build him up. We have no idea. That guy walks in with patellar tendonitis the next day after we back squat him, dumbbell lunge him, and then and then work
exactly.
on. We're like, no, I mean, we just did the same thing with him. What do you mean? But so we're breaking down a lot of the walls like that in the game, which is a ton of fun because it's established in other sports, and it doesn't really bother me that the game is behind. Or I wouldn't even say that the game is behind. The game is a skill game. Like hit, you throw, you run. In football, like metrics will get you drafted or not drafted. In baseball, skill gets you drafted or not drafted. And so we have the opportunity, though, to take a guy with one tool or two tools and build those into multiple versus drafting everybody with the same level.
Yeah. And you mentioned something in the, in your intro about yourself or the career path about, strength and how it translates because, it's just getting stronger in everything doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to those skills that you need in the sport, right? So,
no, absolutely. Especially in a transverse plane dominant sport.
Exactly. Yeah, that's. Do you want to spend a little time talking about weak sling stuff or anything?
We prescribe to a lot of the DNS principles and the things that we do. I don't know if you've had some of that experience, but we were down in San Diego about a little over a year ago for a DNS throwing seminar and just talking about the oblique sling and how important it is. And we found, talking to some of the baseball strength coaches there, they were still struggling even that a year and a half ago to convince the pitching coaches that these techniques were critical of breathing and embracing properly. And what do you find in that arena?
Yeah, I mean, I think we try to prescribe to anything and everything that our guys will do, especially at this level. We have multiple, we have 25 guys that come from 25 different places that have 25 physical therapists, 25 athletic trainers, 25 strength coaches. So, we're obviously diving into all of this as much as we can, DNS, PRI, we're blowing up balloons. We're side planking on one leg and abducting and trying to build those same patterns to hopefully transition them into something on the field to have a conversation with a pitching coach to say, like, do you realize that this guy's left hip might affect his right elbow? And so, like, I know it sounds crazy to you, but like
Not
might
to
want to take
us,
a look at it.
Yeah.
No. And so but like I said, with the Dodgers, we're so fortunate because we have a staff like that. We have a front office like that is forward thinking and is open to those things. And at the end of the day, I don't think you can get wrapped up into that, because the same stresses that make us really good also can break us down. And so a guy might have a sinker or a slider or a certain pitch that's caused by something that maybe wouldn't line up with PRI or DNS or any of those of those sources. But as long as we're on top of it and we know that we're dealing what we're dealing with, and then not reinforcing bad movement, bad breathing, bad technique in the weight room, so it's cemented in when they go take the mound, I think we give ourselves a better opportunity.
Absolutely. So you just hit on a couple of things of, a little bit of like movement-based philosophy that you pull from. What about training methodology from, overall scope of like annual planning, how you put together training plans? What are some of the, the schools or disciplines that you pull from in utilizing your program there?
Yeah, so like I said, I think before we got on, there's like a big spectrum of athletes. Like we have the 16-year-old Dominican kid that has never lifted a weight, didn't even have a physical education class when he grew up. And we have the 40-year-old reliever that's trying to get one more year out of him. That those are completely different engines. Those are completely different skill sets. That number one goal is to make sure that at 7 o'clock at night when the lights go on, they're able to go on the field. And so we really try to break it down into making sure that we're screening the guys. We know how they move and know where they don't move, especially. And we're going to attack the strength, the foundational linear stuff early on with guys, especially when we get the 16, the 18, the 21-year-old kids with no engine, and try to build that up, because we know that we can make them a little bit more athletic even in the sagittal plane. That's going to give them a chance to move better. We also get the 21, 23-year-old college kid that went through an awesome strength and conditioning program with their college football coach, even though they were playing baseball, and they get stuck in that plane a little bit. So we might spend the first 4 months with that guy trying to open him up and try to get him to move a little bit better, and, to pull from like Gray Cook and to say that he, an overpowered athlete. Like you definitely see a lot of that coming out of college. And I think you're starting to see it a little bit more in high school. Strength and conditioning becomes a bigger thing at the youth and at the high school level. So if we get a kid like that, then it's trying to open them up and get better movement patterns and try to get a little bit more neuromuscular firing and get them to feel some end-range joints that they probably haven't been into in years. And then the Dodgers too. Like we get a lot of free agents, so we've got a guy that's been drafted and developed by somebody else and has their own methodology about the way that they attack things. And so we usually take that program they've been doing and try to rebuild that plane as we're flying it, because we don't get a guy in the off season, as we talk about like annual plans. Like we're fortunate to be in LA where guys want to live in the off season. So we have 10, 12 guys around all the time that we can get our hands on. You look at teams that play in the North, you look at teams that play in the Midwest, their guys are out of there. They're not sitting around for the snow. And so to say that I'm a man of methods, it would probably be wrong, because I don't prescribe to one thing. I really believe in sound principles. I believe in movement, so, mobility and stability first. And when we have that, it's starting to stack up just some general athletic competence and making sure that these guys can run, jump, skip, and do it in a powerful way. And then after that, it's getting into more of the tissue tolerance of the skill-based side of it. So if you're a pitcher, you better have a lot of tolerance in the frontal plane. You better have the ability to start and stop with your lower half. You better have some thoracic mobility and be able to accelerate and decelerate through that movement as well. And then get into the maintenance season. And season is just monitoring everything that goes on with that volume and that workload.
Yeah, I think there's a couple key points that you said there, and I'm gonna reiterate them, because we do some similar stuff with athletes that we intake as well. It's like, you don't just take somebody that's working right from either a movement perspective or a training perspective and go, oh, we're going to throw that completely out the window and start from scratch, right? You want to start with that, and then make some assessments and minor adjustments, and start making those changes. Not well, that methodology doesn't work. We're tossing it. We're gonna rebuild you from the ground up. Like that's that's a pretty dangerous route to go, and especially if you need them to be performing like right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you get a guy, let's say we get a free agent and shows up on the first day of spring training, that's the first time we've shooken hands. Hey, by the way, that old program that you've been doing, I want you to go into an alarm phase with your body and try my program.
Yep.
And oh yeah, by the way, we're going to add the volume to the field that you've never had or you haven't had for 6 months. Let's do that all together. That'll be really good for your.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or how about July 31st, the trade deadline? You get somebody right in the middle of the season.
Right. Yeah, we just gave up all of our prospects to get you to come over here and help us win some ball games late in the season. Can you do me a favor and try this? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and then plus your athlete buy-in on that too. Like that's the whole psychological side of that. It's going to have an effect.
Yeah, and the young player's going to say, "This is what got me here. Why are you going to change it to me now?" And I just, the young coach in me, the 23, 24-year-old kid that probably didn't have any business being in pro ball, but that was the way things worked out, would argue with you and say, "No, this is the best thing that you possibly could do," because of my ego. And trust me, I've been smacked in the mouth quite a bit over the years to know that we can be a little bit more patient than that. The body's a little bit more resilient than we think it is.
It's got to be tough, though, not really being able to monitor an off-season training program like the last pitch of the season, and they all scatter different places. You say, fortunately, you have a few in L.A. that hang around, but you don't really know. They've all got their own, strength and conditioning coaches, private trainers that they work with, and they show up, I guess, in various degrees of fitness when they arrive. I'm just amazed at how often so early in the spring you see so many injuries to players. I mean, they don't even play their first game and they're already sidelined. Is that from starting too quickly, not being prepared over the winter? Or is it just happenstance?
It's multifactorial at best. You have to look at everything. You have to look back to the previous season where a guy's innings up, where his appearance is up, and did his body actually have enough time for the tissue to recover, or was it too much time? Is it a fitness issue? Is it a new strength and conditioning program? Did he lose some range of motion somewhere because he created some new stress somewhere else, and now it's trying to stabilize to, the guy that comes in is like, "Hey, I Olympic lifted this offseason." You're like, "Great, let me see it." And then you watch it and you're like, "Oh boy." So, it's definitely multifactorial. And then that's not even getting into the ramp ups and the build ups and things like that. But I would say for the most part, those are fairly safe. And guys, it all depends on what they prepared themselves for. And for me, if that stress is too high for their relative threshold at the beginning of spring training, that body's going to go into shock and shut down. For some of them, it's going to happen in 2 weeks when the lights turn on for real on April 1st. And they're just going to, they're playing at 90 to 95% right now because there's no adrenaline. And when we get to, when there's 54,000 people in Los Angeles screaming at them, like, the intensity ramps up a little bit. And so it's definitely multifactorial, and it's tough to put it anywhere, but it's kind of the wild, wild west, in my opinion, in the off season. Our staff does an outstanding job of getting out and seeing people. And, I've always made it a point with our strength coaches and with working with our athletic trainers that we have a lot to learn, and we can go to each individual athlete's house and see how they train and see who they train with and what they do. And we're just getting continuing ed when we get that, but we also get some buy-in from the players so that they know, hey, like, we give a shit about you. Sorry. We give a crap about you because we're flying to Dallas, Texas, or the Dominican, or I went to Japan this off season.
Just to meet up with a player.
Just to meet up with a player and break bread with them. Like, that goes a long way when they show up that first day of spring training. Like, this guy actually came and saw me this off season. And because I want to know, like, how they eat. I want to know how their wives cook for them. I want to know how much they play with their kids during the day, because as crazy as that sounds, like, all of that impacts not only their physical, but their mental side too.
Oh, without a doubt.
Well, let's talk about the mental side. Do you guys have a mind coach on staff? Do you have somebody that works with the players on sports psychology?
Yeah, no, there's we have a few of them around, and they do an outstanding job. And just like everything, we're very holistic with what we do and try to put it all together. And it's not its own entity by any means, but I have them break me down as much as they can just to help me get over whatever story I'm telling in my head to make sure that I'm able to work with the athletes in a proper state. But in a game that you fail 70% of the time, and if you fail 70% of the time long enough, you actually make it to the Hall of Fame. That's pretty crazy. Yeah. So you can imagine the need for that side of it in this game.
Yeah, that's
I've never thought about it in that perspective.
Oh yeah, no, a 300 hitter is pretty classic. That's great in the game. If you do it over 15 years, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame, but you're only successful 30% of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Baseball's a unique sport in that you're playing so frequently, and a lot of this is repetitive movements and so forth. What are some of the key things you look at in the season? You mentioned it must have been maybe a few minutes ago on the podcast about volume of ground balls, lifters. We work with lifters. We don't have real athletes.
No real athletes.
The volume that your players are taking, both in the weight room and outside of it. What are some of the things you're tracking actually in season to keep those athletes healthy, or is it just case by case basis to monitor how they're moving and so forth?
Yeah, it almost becomes a don't change type mindset, like because of every day's Groundhog Day, and especially in spring training when you wake up at 3:30 every morning. But in season too, like we got to get ready to play every day. So I read a lot of rugby. I read a lot of soccer, and now basketball's coming out with a lot of research as well. And we try to pull from that and draw from that as much as we can with travel, with rest, with recovery, with making sure that we get guys back. And we look at the metrics that they're using, and we look at maybe some metrics that would line up in baseball, but it's so different. It is so different. You think about just the mental stress of a baseball player that for 3 hours, 162 nights, he's got to get prepared. And you look at football, they've got to do that 16 times. Now, I know the intensity of a football game and the collision that takes place during that is way more intensity than we deal with. But just the fatigue that takes place in a baseball player, that he has to do that every single night, is insane.
Throw the travel on it in the different time zones. Yeah. I mean, that's just it's crazy.
Right. So, for me, it all comes down to who you are, what you do, and what do we need to do to make sure that you play every day. Because there's a lot of peripheral stuff out of boredom that guys want to do. And we try to limit that as much as we can to keep it about whatever they need to have in their system for 7 o'clock that night. So as much like the strength coach in me wants to push people and get after it in the weight room. But when we get deep into the season, like, that's detrimental to us. Yeah. And getting under a bar for 1 or 2 reps is a lot smarter than it is for, blowing out like German volume training, which, some of these guys probably try out in the off season.
Yeah. Your batting average is going down. We got to get that squat up, kid. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you deal with some young players. They think that because it's been beaten into their head that if you work harder, you're going to play better, not work smarter.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely keeping them healthy. And I guess, you got to just look to the next game as opposed to like the rest of the season. Like, what can we do to, make sure you're healthy for the next game? Obviously, there's some longevity factors there, but, if the player can't, get up the next day or the next week, then, what even matters?
Right. No, there's a component of that, and that you start to look at the different roles of the team. So like a starting pitcher, we can have some fun with. Like, it's the one true thing that we can periodize. It's the one true thing where you have some training days in there because they get 4 days off in between starts. But then you look at a bullpen pitcher, and he might throw 3 days in a row and be down for a week, or he might be down for 10 days because the situation never came up that he actually had to get into a game. And then you look at your position players, and you got guys that play 150 out of 162 games, and you got some guys that play 80. And that's the fun part, is to be able to say, like, okay, I know there's 80 nights that you're going to be off this year. That's 80 days that we can train. Let's just pray the manager doesn't put you in the lineup the day after I just crushed you in the weight room.
Right.
So,
right.
And so there's that component of it. and so there's so many different things to look at, and I think that at times we can take ourselves down a rabbit hole and start to think it's this metric, that metric, this lift and that lift, and it's such a cumulative effect. Like I've tried to take the approach of looking from 30,000 feet once the day starts to just watch the people run around on the field, watch the athletes run around the field, even watch the coaches run around the field and wonder why they come in with sore backs and bad hips and things like that. And it's insane. It's insane how much these guys actually move and how much these guys actually rotate.
Yeah, a huge amount of rotational strength in that, going on in that sport. So, which speaking of, rotational shoulders, what are some of the things that you kind of focus on from both a, trying to sustain the health in that fashion or strengthen? What are some of the focuses that you do in training that to help support that?
Yeah, so you start looking at the annual plan, and we get into November and December, and we have these movement patterns restored, and guys are able to sit back into their hips and have some T-spine rotation bilaterally and some T-spine extension. And we start ramping up the med ball stuff. We start ramping up the acceleration training in that transverse plane when we know there's stability there to build not only strength but build power and then build tolerance as we get into January. To know that these guys can handle forcefully rotating over and over again. And then, as we get into January, that volume is going to kick up from a throwing standpoint, and we're going to start to ramp down on the med ball stuff and on the weighted stuff, just because we know the body can only handle X, and we want to make sure that we're not overloading X with, too much of the work in the weight room. And as we get in season, we got to start looking at, okay, they swing right-handed, they throw right-handed, they're only rotating left. What are we doing to bring them back? Can they get into that right hip anymore? Can they get in, are they stuck in the front of their left hip? Can they rotate right at all? Or, if you start looking at some of the PRI stuff, like they actually rotate right way better than they do left because they just get oriented left. And so that becomes where the athletic trainers, the massage therapists, the PTs have become a huge help, is being able to identify movement patterns, especially at the local level, much better than I can, to say like, hey, this guy's not doing this very well. I can back off of this bilateral work, start to get into a little bit of unilateral work, and make sure that he's rotating the opposite way to open that back up.
Yeah.
Over the years, things have certainly changed, particularly if you just talk about pitchers for a minute. But, you say they have 4 days off, but it used to be that way. They used to pitch every 4 days, and guys would go on in their careers, 15, 20 years pitching. They're just bulldogs. What's changed or what's different? Of course, you haven't been around as long as I have. I actually got to see Sandy Koufax pitch a no-hitter at Dodger Stadium. But back in those days, were people not throwing as hard? Was conditioning different? What makes it different today that they have to have 4 days off? And in Japan, I guess they take maybe 5 days off, don't they? Between starts?
They actually in Japan they pitch once a week because you have a 6-man rotation, 1 day off. Yeah. So I think there's no games on Monday. Again, like we start talking, like very multi-factor. Like I think people got scared of injuries, and they started saying like, if 3 is good, 4 is better. Let's pitch every 5 days. That's safer. Guys also used to throw 2 bullpens in between every one of their starts, even on a 4-man rotation. And now, we throw 1. I think very rarely will you see a guy get off the bump twice, maybe if he's working on something. So I think that there was the fear of injury and preserving the starting pitching is where your game is at, is where your team is built. And so we want to make sure that we were taking care of the arms. Guys are throwing harder. Like it's pretty well documented that velocity's up. And I always laugh because I think people like, as soon as they say velocity's up, everybody turns and goes, good job, strength coaches. And then at the same sentence, they go, but injuries are up too. And everybody turns and looks at the strength coaches like, hey, thanks a lot. It's like, it's not that easy. Guys are lifting younger. They're getting stronger. I think they do it. I think a lot of kids come in with an outstanding ability to accelerate their cars, and they have an awful ability to decelerate them. So they can create all this energy and they don't know where they're creating it from. And number one, they can't slow it down. And number two, they're probably not creating it in the right places to slow it down in the right places. So I think there's a factor in that as well. And then you start looking at the showcase stuff and you start looking at how you get drafted. It would be like going to the combine and saying, the NFL combine, and saying like, well, we know the guys that run 4.2s and 4.3s that are higher risk of hamstring injuries, but we'll take the guys that run 4.5s and 4.6s because we know they'll play on the field, a little bit more. Well, wrong. Like,
that's not going to happen.
You're going to take the best athlete. We're going to take the guy that throws the hardest. We're going to take the guy that hits the furthest, that hits the hardest. And so I think that you start seeing kids trying to ramp it up pretty hard to be able to impress these scouts and to be able to impress the people that draft them. And, to use a car analogy, like if I drive my car fast and recklessly all the time and never take it in for maintenance, eventually it's going to blow out.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of car analogies.
Yeah, that is true.
or monster truck analogies.
I have many in our seminars. I give many analogies to how the body and nervous system perform relating to cars. By the way, so
I listened to Dennis Kaiser speak one time, and I was all over it. So
there's so many parallels that can be pulled. Too easy.
Yeah. Let's shift gears here a little bit. I think one thing that a lot of our listeners are going to be super interested in learning from you is, the actual business of being a strength coach, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and, effectively how can they get into the position you're in? Because, arguably you're a strength coach in a professional organization, which is likely the highest level that any strength coach can reach. So, take us on we talked about this in our intro, I think, before we were even recording, but take us on a day-to-day or just through a day of a professional strength coach and what that entails.
Yeah, so spring training is a little bit different, I think, than the regular season, but because it's 55 days long, it's probably warranted to bring up wake-up calls at 3:30 right now, and large cup of coffee in the car and out the door. We're doing staff development together with our strength coaches, our athletic trainers at 5 a.m., and that could be anywhere from some team development stuff where we're actually diving into how to be better people and how to be better teammates, or that could be some continuing ed where the athletic trainers are maybe taking us through some PRI or some DNS, and at the same time we might take them over and go through some strength routines or some methodology with them. But we always get a group workout in together.
And nice. when you talk about that, just to interrupt, how many trainers and strength and conditioning coaches are on the staff?
So we have 11 strength coaches in our organization, all the way from the Dominican Republic to myself in the big leagues. And then on the athletic training side, I think we have about 15 or 16. We have a pretty big major league medical staff, and then you have a couple minor league coordinators, and then one trainer at each level.
So when you're saying you're getting together at 5 in the mornings, that's that group of 26 guys?
Yeah, give or take. Like it's a lot more of the, I would say, of the minor. We go over to the minor league side of the complex and work out with them, and kind of a free for all. Whoever wants to come, whoever has anything to share, we try to get as many people there together as much as possible, because we know we're going to spend the next 190, 200 days together. That we're going to get a lot in, and then we'll have some like concrete continuing ed time where we'll sit down after a game or on an off day and go have somebody come in and speak to us or show us a new product or show us a new methodology. But for the most part, we got about 25, 26 guys, which has been just unbelievable for our bonding and for our teamwork, and to be able to speak from both sides of the house and to be on the same page when things are flying at 100 miles an hour and something's going on in the training room and they need your help, or an athlete can't do something in the weight room, they can actually explain it to us and we're able to understand it, or vice versa. So when we get done with that, we usually have athletes showing up at about 6 a.m. to start training. And from about 6 to 9, that's pretty wide open. We'd like our athletes to develop their own routines and find their own way and be able to take accountability for everything that they do. So until we get to that staff meeting at 9 a.m. and then that clubhouse meeting at 9:15 with the whole organization, we could have anywhere from 60 guys in the weight room, or it might work out to where we have 15 or 20 that come in to get something in. I would say we're closer to that 60 mark because everybody's coming in every day to work on something. It might not be strength and power, but it could be mobility and stability. It could be an SMR session. It could be a hip mobility session just to get ready to go out on the field or get some early hitting in with one of the coaches. So we get done with that clubhouse meeting, team goes out, we have an active warm-up, and the players they go from there. We have bullpens, we have BP, we have team fundamentals, we have throwing programs going on until about 11:45 or noon. And then the players are coming off the field and getting ready for a game at 1 o'clock. And, at 1 o'clock, that's could be, out the back door and playing in our stadium here in Glendale, or that could be down the road 45 minutes in Scottsdale to play one of the teams on the other side of the city. And if we're at home, you'll see a few guys stick around after the game to get some work in. And if we're on the road, guys usually take it to the house because the traffic in Phoenix at 5 o'clock is not really conducive to getting in a car and sitting for an hour and coming back and trying to put a barbell on your spine. And so that's kind of spring training, and that's 55 days this year because of the WBC, and then we break off into the season. And I always tell people when they ask, hey, what's the difference between spring training and the regular season? Number one, we just practice getting up at 3:30 in the morning for the last 6 weeks, and guess what? They don't play as many 1 o'clock games anymore. So we readjust our whole clock just to get ready to play in the regular season at 7 o'clock at night. And then, there's just a different intensity. There's a different mentality from March 31 to April 1st with these guys, and rightfully so. Like, there's a lot on the line. There's a lot that we work for. There's a lot that we're going after. And so we have to be, we kind of get locked in. And I tell my wife, at the beginning of the season, I'll see you in 6 months. Not that I'm not around, but you kind of black out there for a while because you're 7 days at home, you're 7 days on the road, and there's late nights and there's early mornings and everything in between. And not that I'm 24-hour fitness or, one of the gyms that you can get a key card and just go in whenever you want to. But I like the players to feel like, hey, if we're on the road and you feel better by getting up at 9 a.m. in the morning, like, text me, let's go. Like, let's go get a bite to eat and let's go work out. Like, if you feel like you need 5 or 6 hours to recover before the game and that's going to give us a better chance to win, I'm all in. And if you feel like you need to stay and lift until midnight after the game, or you need to stay and do some work until midnight after the game, we'll do that. And we'll catch an Uber to get back to the hotel. We'll skip the team bus. So in season, it's become a 10 a.m., 11 a.m. to midnight kind of thing with these guys every day. Because every one of them has a different routine, and to their credit, like, every one of them, they all work different. Their bodies work different. Their biological clocks are set different. So we want to make sure that we open all of that up for them as much as possible.
Yeah, so you're pulling some hours, that's for sure.
That's intense. And living in L.A., depending on where you live from Dodger Stadium, you're always looking at traffic times and whether it's commute times early in the morning or late at night or whatever, getting out of that stadium. How far away do you live from the stadium, for example?
I live, my wife and I live about 12 miles away from the stadium, so about 2 hours. No, we live up in Glendale, so we're pretty close to the stadium.
That's not too bad, yeah.
No, it's about 15 minutes. 15 minutes from the stadium without traffic. So, and luckily baseball schedule, I go in at 11 or 10 o'clock. I'm going to miss traffic, and I go home after the game's over and traffic's already out of there by that time. So I really don't hit much. It's the day games that if you're off by 15 minutes, you're, slamming your head against the steering wheel. And when we started, when my wife and I moved to LA, we lived at the beach. I guess that was the cool thing to do until you got in the car every morning at 10:45 to take the hour drive to get in to get 23 miles.
Yeah.
But, it was worth it at the time when we didn't have kids to be able to walk down the Strand and kind of decompress every day.
Yeah, I think we're about running up on time here, but I think one last thing that we want to hit you with here, unless these guys want to jump in, but if you can give some of our young strength coaches or young trainers one or two pieces of advice to make it to the level that you're at or to excel in their career. Take someone who's, got the idea they want to get into the profession, outside of their schooling and stuff. Where do they go now? What do they do to get to the level that you're at?
Yeah, I think there's two big things, and I kind of enjoy that question a lot now too, especially interviewing a lot of kids right out of college for some of our younger positions. But number one is that kids are coming out smart. Like the young strength coaches that I hire, I'm relying on them to feed me with new information they learned in school or they learned at some seminar, and I think that's outstanding. But being humble when you come out and realizing right away that there's a lot more to training athletes and especially training professional athletes than the things that you learn in a textbook or the things that you learn in a college weight room. And we deal in a very large multifactorial business in any professional sport that it doesn't always come down to science. Sometimes it comes down to practicality and common sense. And number two, when we start getting outside of the humble part is getting into the sports science. And I don't mean sports tech, but getting into the sports science side and understanding the movement patterns of the game, understanding the movement patterns of the athletes off the field and not just in the weight room. Because I think too many times we try to, fit a square peg into a round hole and it doesn't always work because we're looking in the wrong spot. We got our eyes on the wrong prize. So making sure that we're paying attention to volume and workload and all of those things and not just sets and reps in the weight room.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, indeed.
Ground yourself and know your shit, I suppose.
Yep. So
it's a T-shirt.
Yeah.
I like it.
That'll be the next one.
That's right.
I'll take the royalty on that.
Okay.
Does that go along with
sure
you can't make chicken salad out of chicken?
You can just take it out of my invoice for life coaching or what.
Okay.
Well, Brandon, we look forward to seeing you next week. Look forward to working with you. Does that mean we have to get up at 3:30 to meet you at 5 in the weight room? Is that the plan, or
you guys are always invited to hop in on that?
I think you should do that. Go through a day of it. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you got yourself into that one, didn't you?
So I tell you what, we got a young coach right now who I believe is actually doing the CrossFit Open.
Nice.
And so his mind is in a totally different place than anybody else's is. And so I used to do it where I would write the programming in the morning for us, just because I wanted to kind of be anal and kind of control everything. And now I'm like, why don't you guys, each one of you, write something new every morning? And I tell you what, at 5 a.m., my body doesn't move like it used to at 5 a.m., but this kid that's in the Open wrote this workout this morning, and I was like, oh, God, here we go. But you kind of find a way to grind it out and get through it. But it's one of those sweats that you're not really sure if it's tears or if it's actually perspiration coming out of your body.
So Brandon, just early on, you mentioned that you were, as a youngster, when you were 270, you were a competitive powerlifter.
Yeah.
Do you do any more powerlifting at all? Do you do the big three, or as a training principle, or have you ever thought about competing again?
I probably won't ever compete because I can't really bench press anymore. I had shoulder surgery after a little collision at home plate, and the barbell just doesn't move as well as it used to from my chest. I still dabble in about every kind of squat that you can think of, and have worked tirelessly to actually get some ankle mobility to be able to do a pretty good deadlift. But I don't know if I would love to. It would be a passion of mine if I could actually do it without being in pain, but would love to be able to get back under a bar like I used to. Spent a lot of time the last, let's say, 6 or 7 years diving into the RKC and the Strong First methodology personally, like just swinging iron and being able to double front squats and bells and Turkish get-ups and things like that have probably been more of my bread and butter and probably a sweet spot from a load and volume standpoint.
Yeah, that stuff's great for an overall. I did the HKC and did another seminar with Pavel not too long ago with the Strong First. But some really good stuff that carries over to everything in general fitness for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And the other part of me too is that if I start powerlifting, I can start eating again, and things creep up on me pretty quickly. So looking good in a uniform is always kind of on my mind too, and being 270 at one point in my life is always in the back of my head too. So if I start lifting too much, I can put it on pretty quick, and I'm like, okay, back to the kettlebell.
That's good. Anything else? It's probably not easy to find you on the Major League Baseball app, but if any of our listeners had questions, could they reach you somehow? Is there do you have a?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page that's probably blocked, but the easiest way would be my email, and it's bdmac23@gmail.com, and I'm always interested in from hearing from people and answering questions and giving anybody advice that's looking for it.
All right. Well, thanks again, Brandon. I really appreciated our time today, and looking forward to meeting you in person next week.
These guys will see you at 5 a.m.
That's right.
Yeah. Can't wait. You guys will love our staff, so they'll be all about it.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us on Strength Chat.